Hey everyone, and welcome to another deep dive where we really dig into some fascinating stuff from our sources and kind of explore it all together.
That's right.
And today we're going way back in time to ancient China,
Oh, yeah.
a civilization that
Yeah.
honestly, when you peel back the layers and you really start to understand it,
Yeah.
it reveals this just breathtaking level of innovation and sophistication.
It really does.
Forget those kind of like old dusty stereotypes you might have about ancient civilizations,
Whoa.
because when you think about ancient China, we're talking about a society that was buzzing with technological advancements,
Yeah.
with these really complex social structures.
Hmm.
In a lot of ways, they were kind of leading the world back then.
They really were.
And what's so cool is that our sources for this dive, they highlight how innovation wasn't just something reserved for the elite
Right.
or just for these grand, massive projects. It was actually woven into the fabric of their everyday lives.
Totally. And when you consider the sheer scope of their influence, I mean, from monumental engineering projects to some really, really profound philosophical ideas,
Yeah,
uh, it's truly astounding.
it is.
It speaks volumes about their intellectual drive and their practical ingenuity.
Yeah, for sure. So our mission in this deep dive is to uncover some of the most groundbreaking innovations that came out of ancient China
Okay.
and really try to understand, how these innovations continue to shape our world today.
I like it.
So we're going to be delving into the stories behind some really iconic achievements,
Okay.
from the immense scale of the Great Wall to the almost like revolutionary simplicity of paper making.
Mm-hmm.
We'll also be exploring the unexpected beginnings of gunpowder, the
Yeah.
navigational power of the compass, and the global reach of silk.
Wow.
So much to cover.
Can't wait.
So let's start unpacking all of this. And I think a good place to begin is with a structure that still captures the imagination of so many people around the world:
Okay.
the Great Wall.
The Great Wall of China. I mean, for many people, it's this image that comes to mind of this just colossal barrier,
Yeah,
snaking across the
of
mountains.
course it is.
But when you really examine our sources,
Yeah,
you begin to appreciate that it's so much more than just a wall.
yeah,
It's this powerful testament to ancient engineering capabilities.
yeah, for sure. We're talking about a structure that stretches over 13,000 miles.
14,000 miles.
That's incredible.
Brutal.
And what's really interesting is that it wasn't built in one go, in one fell swoop.
Right.
Our sources point out that it's actually this amalgamation of walls that were constructed by different dynasties across centuries.
Centuries.
Yeah, like when you really think about it, the logistics alone are mind-boggling for that time period.
Absolutely.
How do you coordinate a project that massive and that long term?
Well, that's a key point. Its construction demanded this incredibly sophisticated understanding of material science. They had to know which types of stone and earthworks would best withstand the elements and potential invaders over these vast distances and changing terrains.
Yeah.
And then consider the sheer human element, feeding, housing, organizing the hundreds of thousands of laborers that were involved in building this thing.
Yeah, it's hard to even fathom.
And let's not overlook the strategic brilliance, deciding where and how to build this wall to maximize its defensive advantages.
It's true.
It reflects a really advanced level of project management and engineering principles.
Yeah. I mean, it wasn't just about, piling stones on top of each other.
Oh.
This was a meticulously planned
Yes.
and executed endeavor that spanned generations.
Generation.
It really does make you think about it differently, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
So let's move from this immense feat of engineering to something that might seem a little more commonplace,
Okay.
but honestly had an equally transformative impact on the world. And that's the invention of paper.
Ah, yes. Paper, the silent revolution, as some historians call it.
I like that.
Yeah, in a world where information was so painstakingly recorded on bamboo strips or expensive silk, the arrival of paper in ancient China was this pivotal moment for the spread of knowledge,
For sure.
long before the printing press even existed.
Yeah. And we can really thank Kai Lun, a court official during the Han Dynasty around 105 AD,
Okay.
with really standardizing this process.
Right.
Our sources detail how he utilized these surprisingly simple materials,
Yeah.
like mulberry bark and hemp rags, to create paper.
Pretty amazing.
It's pretty remarkable to think about the huge impact of something that came from such basic resources.
It is, isn't it?
So what's so fascinating here is how this seemingly straightforward invention unlocked this just enormous potential.
Yeah. Suddenly you had a relatively affordable and portable medium for writing and record keeping.
Yeah.
I mean, think about the implications for governance, the ability to create and store more extensive official documents.
That's true.
Consider the impact on scholarship. More books could be produced, making knowledge more accessible. And ultimately, paper facilitated the wider sharing of ideas across geographical boundaries.
Yeah.
It truly laid the groundwork for intellectual growth, not just within China, but eventually across the globe.
Yeah.
I mean, imagine a world where every piece of written information was heavy and cumbersome.
Oh, yeah.
Paper changed everything.
It really is hard to imagine a world without paper.
I know.
It's such a foundational technology that I think we often take for granted.
Yeah, we do.
Okay, well, let's transition to something with a bit more bang, shall we?
Oh, I like where this is going.
We're going to talk about gunpowder.
Gunpowder, a truly accidental yet world-altering discovery.
Yeah, and our sources, they remind us that gunpowder wasn't the result of some, scientific quest for better weaponry.
Right.
It was actually alchemists who were searching for that mythical elixir of immortality.
The elixir of immortality.
Yeah, they were the ones who inadvertently created this potent mixture.
Wow. Talk about an unexpected side effect.
Yeah, so these early forms of gunpowder, they weren't immediately used for, cannons and warfare.
No, they weren't.
The sources indicate that their initial applications were actually in something much more celebratory,
Oh,
perhaps even spiritual.
interesting.
Yeah, so the early uses were primarily in fireworks
Oh, wow.
and for creating loud noises during religious ceremonies,
Yeah.
things that were believed to ward off evil spirits.
Wow. What a contrast to its later, more destructive applications.
It is, right?
Yeah.
But even in this early form, you can see how the discovery held the seeds of a massive technological and military shift.
Oh, absolutely.
And it wasn't long before that military potential became very apparent.
Right.
It's almost a textbook example of how a discovery made for one purpose
Yeah,
can lead to entirely different and often much more significant consequences.
totally.
Gunpowder's impact on warfare globally is undeniable. It reshaped military tactics, the balance of power, the very nature of empires.
For sure.
I mean, when you think about the history of conflict, gunpowder marks this major turning point.
It does, if we connect this to the bigger picture. The development and adoption of gunpowder really represents this fundamental shift in military history.
Yeah.
It diminished the importance of traditional fortifications and battlefield tactics,
Fine.
and eventually led to the rise of firearms and artillery, forever changing how wars were fought across continents.
Yeah, it's a huge turning point.
Ah,
Okay, well, let's shift gears again.
okay.
Moving from explosions to a tool of navigation.
Yeah.
Let's explore the compass, another brilliant invention that came out of ancient China.
Indeed, the invention of the magnetic compass again during the Han Dynasty was a truly transformative development,
Yeah.
particularly for maritime travel.
Yeah, and before the compass came along, navigation relied heavily on observing the stars and landmarks,
Right.
which, these methods were often unreliable because of weather conditions or the limitations of coastal sailing.
That's true.
And it's interesting to note that the compass's original purpose wasn't to guide ships across the seas.
Oh.
Yeah, our sources point out that it was initially used in the practice of feng shui,
Like shui.
to orient structures and spaces in accordance with natural energy flows.
That's fascinating. So,
Really?
what began as a tool for achieving earthly harmony
Yeah?
eventually became indispensable for traversing the vast oceans.
It really did.
The compass significantly improved the accuracy and reliability of sea travel,
Yeah.
opening up these new trade routes and facilitating greater cultural exchange between distant civilizations.
Mm-hmm.
And it enabled longer and more daring voyages, effectively shrinking the known world.
It's true.
I mean, think about early explorers and imagine how revolutionary a reliable directional tool would have been for them.
It's incredible. So we've got paper for communication, gunpowder for power,
Yeah.
and the compass for travel.
Mm-hmm.
And it's remarkable how these seemingly disparate innovations all contributed to a more interconnected world.
Totally.
And speaking of connection and trade, we can't overlook the luxurious and highly influential commodity of silk.
Silk, absolutely. Like, silk was so much more than just this beautiful and luxurious fabric.
Right.
It was the very cornerstone of a major global trade network.
Right.
The Silk Road wasn't just a route for exchanging goods. It was a vital conduit for moving ideas, technologies, and cultures between the East and the West.
Yeah, for centuries.
For centuries.
And the name itself, the Silk Road, tells you just how central silk was to this entire system.
Absolutely.
It was the highly prized commodity that essentially drove the establishment and maintenance of these
Mm,
long and often perilous trade routes.
that's true.
The sources we have, they highlight how the production of silk in ancient China was this closely guarded state secret for a long time.
A state secret.
Yeah, and this really underscores its immense economic and cultural significance.
Yeah.
I mean, can you imagine the value placed on something whose production was so carefully controlled?
Yeah, it's incredible. But what's truly fascinating is how this single luxurious commodity could drive such significant global interactions. I mean, the desire for silk fueled exploration, diplomacy, and even conflicts across continents. Wow.
It was indeed the fabric of an empire, not just metaphorically in terms of its beauty and association with royalty, but in its very real economic and political impact.
Yeah, so we've looked at all of these incredible innovations.
We have.
And it's clear that ancient China was this powerhouse of ingenuity.
Oh, yeah.
But this innovation didn't just arise in isolation, did it?
Well, that's a vital point. The relative political stability that existed during certain dynasties,
Yeah.
the social structures that encouraged learning and craftsmanship,
Mm-hmm.
and the prevailing philosophical environment all played this really significant role in nurturing this creative spirit.
Yeah.
For instance, a stable empire could invest in monumental infrastructure projects like the Great Wall
Yeah.
and provide support for intellectual pursuits that led to inventions like paper.
That's true. And as we touched on earlier, these innovations, they weren't isolated events. They
Yeah.
often built upon each other in these really fascinating ways.
Paper, for example, by making the recording and dissemination of knowledge easier and more widespread, likely fueled further advancements in various fields.
Yeah.
It's a clear example of how progress is often interconnected.
Precisely. And if we consider the influence of core Chinese philosophies like Confucianism and Taoism,
Yeah.
we see this emphasis on principles such as harmony with nature and a focus on practical application and observation.
Right?
These philosophical underpinnings likely influenced the thinking of inventors and scholars, guiding their approaches to problem solving and innovation.
Yeah.
A deep respect for natural materials, for instance, may have directly contributed to the early advancements in textiles and papermaking techniques.
It's so interesting how all of this stuff is connected.
Yeah.
It really gives you this much deeper appreciation for the lasting legacy of these innovations, doesn't it?
It does.
They weren't just these, isolated flashes of brilliance. They were deeply embedded in this rich cultural and intellectual landscape.
Yeah.
And it's remarkable how these ancient advancements continue to resonate and have echoes in our modern technologies and industries.
Absolutely. I mean, we can trace a direct line from the invention of papermaking to the books, newspapers, and documents we still use today,
Yeah.
and even to the fundamental principles of information storage and dissemination in our digital age.
It's true.
Gunpowder's impact on military technology continues to be felt globally,
Mm-hmm.
and the core principles of magnetic navigation remain fundamental to modern transportation.
Yeah.
And even the concept of vast interconnected trade networks pioneered by the Silk Road has clear parallels with our modern globalized economy.
Yeah, so much of what we take for granted today has its roots in ancient China.
It's amazing.
Well, let's bring some of the key individuals and maybe some of the more surprising or quirky details into sharper focus.
Okay, I like it.
So we've already talked about Kai Lun as the pivotal figure in the standardization of papermaking.
Yes, Kai Lun, a true innovator whose contribution had a profound and lasting impact on the entire world.
Yeah, and then you have someone like the first emperor, Qin Shi Huang.
Yeah.
Well, he's often remembered for his, shall we say, firm hand.
Yeah.
Our sources also point to his incredibly ambitious projects,
Oh, right.
such as, the early construction of the Great Wall
Mm.
and the creation of the Terracotta Army
Terracotta Army.
as prime examples of this real innovative spirit in terms of large-scale organization and engineering for that era.
That's an important perspective. Innovation isn't always solely about a single invention.
Right.
It can also manifest in the sheer scale and ambition of societal undertakings.
That's true.
And Qin Shi Huang's reign, despite its complexities, certainly demonstrated a remarkable capacity for large-scale, innovative projects
Yeah.
that had lasting consequences.
And speaking of scale, the Terracotta Army is just this astonishing example of that.
It is.
Over 8,000 life-size soldiers, each with unique features.
Wow.
As our sources detail, that level of artistic and technical skill is simply astounding for that period.
It's mind-blowing.
It makes you wonder about the processes and the level of craftsmanship involved.
It does. It speaks to a highly sophisticated understanding of both artistic representation and the logistics of mass production,
Yeah.
even if each piece was individually crafted with such detail.
It's incredible. And it's also worth remembering that those early alchemists, in their pursuit of eternal life,
Right.
they weren't just accidentally creating explosives.
Yeah.
Our sources also credit them with significant contributions to fields like ceramics and metallurgy.
Oh, wow.
It's this fascinating reminder that the pursuit of even seemingly fantastical goals can sometimes lead to very real and practical advancements in unexpected areas.
It's a wonderful paradox to consider, isn't it?
It is.
The quest for the mythical often leading to tangible scientific progress.
Exactly. So as we wrap up this deep dive into ancient Chinese innovations, what would you say is the most significant takeaway?
I think the overarching takeaway is that ancient China was this exceptionally advanced civilization with a deep and sophisticated understanding of science, engineering, and the arts.
Hmm.
And their innovations weren't mere novelties. They fundamentally reshaped the trajectory of not only China's own history, but also the course of global technological and cultural development.
Yeah.
I mean, we continue to live with the profound legacies of their ingenuity in countless ways.
It's true. And it's this powerful reminder
Yeah.
that innovation isn't just this modern phenomenon.
Right.
It's this continuous thread that runs throughout human history.
Yeah.
And ancient China wove some incredibly strong and enduring strands in that thread.
They did.
Well, hey, for you, our listener, here's a thought to carry with you.
Okay.
Considering the amazing innovations we've explored today, the great wallpaper-making gunpowder, the compass and silk, which one do you believe has had the most far-reaching and lasting impact on the modern world, and why?
That's a good one.
And as you're thinking about that, maybe also take a moment to reflect on how those fundamental principles of innovation that we've seen in ancient China, that enduring spirit of problem-solving resourcefulness and the relentless pursuit of knowledge, how those principles remain just as vital and relevant in our world today.
Great point.
Well, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into ancient China.
Thanks for having me.
It's been a pleasure.
It has been fun.
Until next time.
See you later. Bye.